Your host, Kai McKeon from Three Man Weave. And with me are two of the best bracketologists in all of the United States of America. We have Lukas Harkins. We have Brad Wachtel. I'm excited to break down the bracket with you guys as it stands today on January 30th. A reminder to folks out there, a lot of resumes are going to be shifting around in the coming weeks here. This bracket's not even close to being finished yet, but still fun to think about what it could look like, Lukas. Fun to see which teams are in and out right now and what your team, if you're a fan of a bubble team, for instance, has to play for in the next few weeks here. So, Lukas, I'm going to go to you really quick for a question. Strength of the bubble. I haven't heard a lot of people say weakest bubble ever quite yet. Is it still to come? Are people going to talk about it? What do you think?
Well, it's always going to come, for one.
Mm-hmm.
There's no avoiding it. It's a yearly tradition. Now, with regards to this year in particular, I'm not sure we'll hear it as much as normal because I think there's enough teams in the middle of the pack in like the 6 to 9 seed range that also have pretty bad losses this year that it's kind of just feel like we might hear worst tournament field ever, but I don't necessarily see, and I'm not sure we'll hear worst field. I think this year we're seeing even TCU, Iowa, Boise State, all teams that are kind of in pretty good shape right now all have a quad 4 loss. I feel like there's a lot. Clemson has 2 of them. I think there's a lot of teams that are kind of in that have more. There's more bad losses in the net top 60 this year than there are traditionally at this point in the season. And I think we'll hear less about how bad the bubble is and more just like, wow, there's a lot of pretty bad losses across the table.
Brad, do you agree?
I do agree. Also with the bubble, as it is almost every single year, in the span of 1 to 2 weeks, a team could go from not even being mentioned to suddenly in the field. I take a look at a team like Virginia Tech right now, who got off to a terrible start in conference play. They're at full strength right now. They're starting to win some games. I think they're a team that could have, after a good week or two, they could sneak right back into the field. So I think even though I think it's a little bit stronger than in past years at the current moment, like Lukas said, I think it's going to end up to the point where it's going to be like, weakest bubble ever.
I asked this last year, but nobody remembers because it's been a year. But I always like to get bracketologists' opinion on this. What, if anything, I'll go to Lukas first, is the number one most important thing to you on a team's resume? I know it's the whole enchilada, but if there's anything that sticks out to you, what do you gravitate towards firstly when you look at a sheet?
It kind of depends where I'm looking in the field. I think more than anything, I think that the more at the top of the field, if you're looking at 1, 2, 3 seeds, I'm looking at quadrant 1 record more than anything else. See if they get a quad 1A. The further down you go, the more I emphasize what your resume looks like, your true resume rankings over necessarily your quality rankings. That's more emphasis on a KPI or strength of record, and putting a little bit more emphasis on road wins. And wins over the field, those become a little bit more prevalent the further down I go. But really, the first thing you look at is record. Comes down to it, you got to win games.
Yeah, same with you, Brad.
Yeah, similar to what Lukas said. It depends which part of the bracket you're looking at. If you're looking at the bubble, you might be paying attention a little more to if you know who's in the field. Their predictive metrics. If you remember last year, a team like Rutgers who ended up with 8 wins against the field, but their metrics were in the 70s. They were in the first 4 games. So it's something to take a look at with a lot of the teams there. When you look at a little bit closer to the top part of the bracket and the 1 seeds, for me, I think you want to be a 1 seed. Who have you beaten? Who is your best win? Along with everything else, along with how you are against high quadrant 1 teams, quadrant 1 and quadrant 1 and 2. It isn't one particular thing that stands out, but there needs to be a lot of something, and there needs to be something that sticks out from the other teams to prove your worth as a 1 seed.
I hear a lot of people talk about wins against the field, and certainly important, but that doesn't show up on a team sheet, does it? Or am I just mistaken? Is it actually something the committee looks at, do you think, wins against the field?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's something that they take into account. Okay. I don't think it's necessarily wins against the field per se, because I think that kind of has a hard cut line that I'm not sure is altogether fair. Is it really a much better win to beat a team at home who's your last 4 team in versus beating a team on the road that's the first 4 team out? I think there's definitely more nuance to it than that, but I think that beating teams that are of tournament quality has value.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Enough of the intro, guys. I've bored people long enough. I want to get into the nitty gritty. I want to talk about the teams currently in the field and also the teams at the top of the bracket right now. Let's start with the 1 seeds. I'm going to Lukas first here. Give me your 1 seeds as of today, January 30th.
So for me, I've gone with Purdue and Alabama have been on my 1 line for a while. They stay there. I moved Tennessee up to the 1 line this weekend after another good win. They're up to number 1 on KenPom. They're across the board, have tremendously good quality metrics, and that gives them my edge right now. They're second in BPI. They're first in KenPom, first in Sagarin. They don't necessarily have the quantity of quality wins that a team like UCLA or Kansas has, or Arizona for that matter, who I had as a 1 seed last week was Arizona. I think that Tennessee, it's just historical data just seems to suggest they're number 2 in the net and 1.3 in average across quality metrics. That's a team that probably gets a 1 seed. And Houston is in a similar boat. Number 1 in the net, 1.7 across quality metrics. They're 9-1 in quadrants 1 and 2. I think that that's another team that's there. But I think you could make an argument for probably 7 teams right now to be on the 1 line today.
All right, Brad, let's get your 1 seed list here. What do you got?
Yeah, so I have 3 out of the 4 same 1 seeds as Lukas. My one difference is I have Arizona. Reason why I have Arizona over Houston is number 1, they're 5-0 against high quadrant 1 teams. The only other team that can say that in the country is Purdue, who is the number 1 overall seed. I believe that their wins over Tennessee, who is a fellow 1 seed, and UCLA, another team that is a 2 seed at the moment, in my opinion, is better wins than what Houston has right now. And even though Houston has, maybe their metrics are a little bit better, I don't think their top of the line wins are better. And I think in terms of Houston, this is my opinion, if they don't win out the rest of the way, I have a hard time believing that they will get a number 1 seed. I just don't think they have the quality of games in that league. They play Memphis a couple times, which would be solid wins. But other than that, you don't have any wins that really move the needle. And if you lose, it's a problem. And the other reason I have Houston off the 1 line too is they're the only team that has a quadrant 3 loss from all the teams in contention.
Yeah, strong arguments there. I do have a question related to this. You mentioned Houston not having quite as many quality wins. What point does it reach, for instance, when you get just a massive quantity of quality wins? Like Kansas, for instance, has 12 Q1, Q2 wins. We know they're going to have more and more and more in the Big 12. At what point is the tipping scale when you see Houston probably stopping around 9 or 10? When does it become overwhelming? When it's like, okay, your predicted metrics are great, but this team right below you has X amount of quality wins more than you, Brad.
Yeah, and I think that's why a team like Kansas is going to be in the driver's seat to get a 1 seed eventually, assuming they go on and play like we know they're capable of playing. But the Big 12 is the best conference in the country. And even a team like Baylor, who is creeping up the seed line, they're another team who, in my opinion, 1 seed is not out of the question when it's all said and done. Not yet. But I think when you play in a league that has so many opportunities, your chances of getting a 1 seed are just so much better. Like if you're Houston, you need to be near perfect. And they had that Q3 loss. And it's really going to make things difficult for them. And, it's asking a lot for them to win out. And maybe they are capable of being a 1 seed. But if you look at what's been done in the past with Houston's resume a couple of years ago, they finished with 3 losses, had a very similar resume, had 1 bad loss, had a net in the top 5, and they ended up getting a 2 seed or a 3 seed.
3
no,
seed,
it was a
right?
2 seed. I'm sorry, it was a 2 seed.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. Remember that. That's true. I think from a public perspective here, I think people would be surprised to not see a Big 12 team on the 1 seed line, given just how dominant that conference has been this season, how the depth of it. But Lukas, I guess no one really looks at that in the committee. There's no narratives here, right? Conference play, whatnot.
Of course not. Of course. Now I do agree when it comes to Houston. I think that the thing that I mentioned when I put them on the 1 line is how good their quality metrics are. And I agree with Brad in that, like, it will take a really good finish, because if they have another one of those bad losses, it's going to hurt their quality metrics than it will any other team would. So I think that that's the thing, that right now they stand there, and I agree that the Big 12 is in pretty good shape to be in that conversation. The other team I'd even go as far as to mention is Kansas State. The only thing really holding Kansas State back from making a big jump is their quality metrics. And if they continue to dominate really good teams, they're 8-3 in quadrants 1 and 2, they're 3-2 in quad 1A. The quality metrics will get there. They're a team that intrigues me, at least, as a team that has such a good record already. They built up a lot of goodwill, and they have a lot of opportunities down the stretch. I think we're going to see definitely a Big 12 team on the one line at some point. And I think that that is something that even the committee might do just out of like sheer ease. Like right now, it is a
True.
Like right now, if you're building a bracket, like it's really easy to go for your 1 seeds through 16 seeds, put that together. When it comes to building a bracket right now, separating the Big 12 among top 4 seed lines is very difficult. When you have 5 teams that are on the 2 or 3 line, you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. The old bracket rules come into play here, especially when a conference has so many good teams or similar teams in the same lines, right? All right, I want to go to bubble. So we're going away from the 1 seeds. We're going right to the bubble talk here. The weakest bubble ever, perhaps. Not quite. Not this season.
Not until March, 16th or something?
Yeah, we still have a lot of time. We got all of February here. I'm going to Brad first for his last 4 in. Brad, hit me with it.
All right, so my last 4 in right now, Kentucky. They have a solid strength of record for bubble teams. And they won at Tennessee, who many people have as a 1 seed at the moment. So when you're figuring out the bubble, you're trying to figure out things that'll separate you from other bubble teams. And that win over Tennessee is definitely a separator, but by no means are they safe. Big week ahead for them as usual. I know they play at Ole Miss. You know, it's a game they need to win, quite frankly. Then you have Nevada. They picked up a quality win over New Mexico last week to get into the field. They don't have any bad losses, which is something that is important when you are looking at teams that are on the bubble. They have a solid net, which is top 40, solid strength of record, top 40. And they also have a win over Boise State. Is their resume great? No, not by any means. They do play in the Mountain West, which seems to be better than it has in past years, providing more opportunities. But right now they are on the right side of the bubble. Next I have is Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is an interesting team because the metrics say that they're out. But if you look into their record against quadrants, 3-1 against high quadrant 1 teams, 3-2 against quadrant 1 teams, 7-6 against quadrant 1 and 2 teams, and 5 wins against the field. It just stacks up better than all other bubble teams they're competing with right now. They have the wins. They need to get their metrics in a better place. So I have them in as my second to last team in. And finally, I have Wisconsin, who is really plummeting by the day. One reason I have them in is because their strength of record is 42, which is still okay enough. 6 wins against quadrant 1 and 2 teams. And the big separator for me is when you look at their wins, their best wins are on the road at Marquette and at Iowa, which is better than other teams that are in the mix with them.
All right. Yeah. I saw a question in the chat on Wisconsin. Interesting. We might discuss them a little further here, but I want Lucas's last 4 in before we do.
Yeah, I'm in a relatively similar boat. Kentucky is my 4th to last team in, same as Brad. We're in the same spot with Kentucky there. I have Oklahoma creeping into the field now after a home win over Alabama that was just monstrous. I mean, there's one thing to beat Alabama. It's another thing to beat Alabama by 24. I think that was kind of the thing. I think their schedule is still not their schedule. Their record is still in a difficult spot to get into the tournament. They're 12-9 overall. They're playing in a very, very difficult conference, which is going to make it even harder to make that to keep that record afloat. But I think that they're a team that right now is sitting in a decent spot. They have pretty good metrics across the board. They're top 50 in basically everything except the net. They're 6-9 in quads 1 and 2, which, albeit not great, is somewhat comparable to a lot of other teams on the bubble right now. It's more of that quantity. The 4 of those 6 wins are in quad 1. As we go to Pitt, Brad already discussed on Pitt. They're 3-1 in high quad games. The other thing I'll mention is that Florida State is going to play the ACC schedule the rest of the year. Florida State is Pitt's quad 4 loss. They're 201st in the net right now. If they climb into the top 160, that Pitt resume is going to look a lot better. If that can get into the quad 3 area. Then I finished my last team in the field is Texas A&M. Kind of have decent metrics across the board. They're 35th in average quality metrics, 4-4 in quads 1 and 2. It's usually a resume that I would keep on the outside with a quad 3 and a quad 4 loss. But as I mentioned earlier, there's just a lot of teams with those kind of losses this year.
Going to the consensus bracket, the Field of 68 bracketologist, the consensus mesh of us, Lukas, Brad, Rocco, Andy Bottoms, their last 4 in should be popping up on the screen momentarily here. This is what the Field of 68 says combined: Kentucky, Pitt, Oklahoma, and Nevada. So both of you guys have a smattering of these teams in your field. I don't want to spoil any first 4 outs here, but we should talk Wisconsin really quick. We do have a question from Adam in the chat. How much would you ding a team when one of their best wins was against a team missing a key player, i.e. Iowa in this case for Wisconsin? Your thoughts, Brad? I don't know if the committee really goes surgical like that down the line into injuries game by game. It seems unlikely to me, but perhaps not. What do you think?
I think if that's your only key win, then yes.
Okay.
But the fact that they also won at Marquette, I don't think it's really going to matter that much. And I get why people would have Wisconsin out right now. Their net is awful, 74. I know I mentioned Rutgers a little while ago. Rutgers got in last year with a net in the mid 70s. Did have a much stronger resume though, but right now, and to top it off, their predictive metrics are terrible too. So Wisconsin is one bad week away from being out of the first 4 out.
Yeah. Of course, the resume metrics are what determine getting into the field, correct? So
correct.
Even though their net 74-ish, Lukas, their resume metrics might be good enough to still get into the field, correct?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And the other thing is with the case in point of the win over Iowa, if the committee wants to get so surgical as that Iowa game, they're not going to be able to look past going 0-3 without Tyler Wall.
Exactly, right? Yeah.
You're going to go as deep as to mention Iowa, a team you played, being without a key player in a win. You're going to have to mention those games, especially a 4-point loss at home to Michigan State without Tyler Wall is a winnable game if he's on the floor.
Hey, I always go back to that Notre Dame team when they didn't have Bonzie Colson and what, Matty Farrell, is that his name?
Yeah.
And man, if the committee really took that into account, they still didn't make the field. So I have always been skeptical of the committee actually doing that. Besides
Sometimes
talking,
they throw you a curveball and they pick and choose.
Yeah, exactly.
I think
for the most part, they're pretty consistent.
A talking point on those bracket shows, I think, the CBS shows, the guy will come on and say why a team is here and here. It's very inconsistent, but I digress. Let's get into the first 4 out to round out our bubble here. Lukas, start us off with your first 4 teams out.
So for me, Nevada is my first team out of the field. Very late decision to go with Nevada on the outside. I think Brad already mentioned they have really good resume metrics. They're 24th in KPI, 39th in strength of record. But overall, they just lack the true quality. They're 0-3 in quad 1A games, and they're 2-5 in quad 1. No bad losses, a huge plus. I think that they're kind of a team that without a huge bunch of great opportunities in conference play is going to have a really strong finish to the year to get in there. And I think part of the thing that comes back for Nevada is they're 129th in non-conference strength. The schedule is a difficult place to sit compared to the rest of the bubble. And I think they're just going to have some work to do in that regard. But I do think the Mountain West in general is in pretty good shape. Arizona State took a hit for me. They were in the field last week. Tough loss. Their metrics are all sub 50 right now. They have a quad 4 loss to their name. They're a team that is banking on their high quality wins right now, 6-6 in quads 1 and 2, 3 of those wins being in quad 1. Penn State is a team that I really like to watch, but I obviously can't put that into perspective here. But their metrics are just kind of slightly better than Arizona State. And they don't have any bad losses either, which kind of puts them in that same category as Nevada for me, but with worse resume and better quality metrics. As for Wisconsin, they're my 4th team out. 6-8 in quads 1 and 2 is good, but they only have one quad 3 win. They're under 500 in quads 1, 2, and 3 games. Their resume metrics are great. Well, relative to some bubble teams, they're pretty good, mid 40s, and a pretty poor quality metrics in the mid 60s, not to mention being under 500 by a significant amount in road games this year. They're 2-4 away from home. Yep.
Where would Arizona State be without that San Francisco loss? One has to think. They lost by 40, right? That's got to do a damper on their yes. metrics there. All right, Brad, let's get your first four out before we round it out with our consensus.
All right, my first four out, I have Oklahoma, who I know Lukas has in. My reasoning for keeping them out, even though they did get the huge win over Alabama in convincing fashion, which is enormous, no question about it. When you start to get to the bubble, you start nitpicking. They don't have any wins away from home against at-large teams. So the majority of their wins, their good wins, did come at home. So you want to be a tournament team. You know, you do need to prove at least a little bit that you can beat some good teams away from home. Next up, I have Texas A&M, under 500 Q1. They have 2 bad losses, including a quadrant 4 loss. And their strength of schedule at 54 is a bit worse than a few of the bubble teams. In fact, all the bubble teams that I have in my last 4 in. Penn State, as Lukas touched upon as well, really like Penn State, and I think they have a number of quality opportunities ahead of them playing in the Big Ten, including at Purdue later this week. Obviously, you win that game, we know that puts them squarely in the field for sure. They don't have any bad losses, but their strength of record is in the mid-50s, not particularly great, and they're 3-5 road neutral. And then Arizona State, who's really fallen off the last couple of weeks, only 1 win against the field. That's against Creighton on a neutral site, and a 64 net, including a quadrant 4 loss, keeps them out for me at the moment.
Brad, let me know if you disagree with me on this, because I think as we've gone through this bubble for yours, ours, mine, and the consensus, as I go through making a field right now, it really feels like we're pretty much in general agreement as a consensus, but middle of the 10 seeds through maybe 6 or 7 teams out, it's kind of splitting hairs right now. You can make an argument for anyone from the top of that list to the bottom of that list to be in the field, and it is very close.
No question. Yeah, and take a look at what do you do with a team like Boise State? Boise State is a team, they're 7-4 against quadrant 1 and 2 teams, which is really good, but they do have a Q4 loss. They have a strong net in the top 25, but who have they beaten? They're a very difficult team to project, and I have them in the field at the moment. I have them as an 11 seed currently. But people could definitely have them higher based on their metrics. They're an interesting team.
And sticking in the Mountain West, even Utah State right now, it's hard to imagine a team 34th in the net, 32nd in KPI, and we haven't even mentioned them yet in our bubble conversation. Mm-hmm. And they don't have a quad 1 win, and they have 2 quad 4 losses.
Yeah, and I think with Utah State is, like you said, the 2 quad 4 losses and not having any wins against the field, for me, that keeps them out at the moment.
Real quick on Oklahoma, their conference record is 2-6. Conference record is not on the team sheet. But at what point does it become impossible to allow a team in with what is the threshold for conference record, do you think? I guess it starts to affect your actual overall record. But is there a threshold, Lukas? Theoretically, if a team was over 500, could they go 5-15 in conference play and still make the field?
I think it's kind of a moot argument overall, because things just kind of battle against each other. If you have such a poor conference record that it impacts your overall record, you're going to lose. You're not going to make the tournament. And if you have a good enough non-conference record that it backs up a poor conference record, your non-conference strength of schedule is probably terrible. And that will keep you out of the field. To me, it's just kind of an argument with no matter where you go in that, there's no perfect middle ground where you can have a poor conference record, like a very poor conference record, and still get in. Something is going to be off there.
Right.
Yeah, and there's no exact science to it, but you kind of look at what's been done with the NCAA committee and their history. 4 games under 500 in league play. We've seen that a good amount. 8-12, 7-11. And you look at the Big 12 this year, that's the conference I'm sure you're talking about. I could definitely see one or two teams getting in, 4 games under 500. Once you start to get to 5 or 6 games under, like Lukas said, your overall record may not be even over 500.
Right.
Or you might be hovering around 500, which the committee will see as an issue.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate it. Thanks for humoring me. All right, let's go to the Field of 68 consensus. First four out. Take a look at that. We have Texas A&M, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Arizona State. Again, usual suspects here. Real quick, guys. I'll go to Lukas here. Wisconsin versus Penn State. What are the differences here? Give me a argument case for one over the other. You have Penn State over Wisconsin, I believe.
Yes, I do right now, and it's just because their overall metrics are just significantly better. If you want to go in that direction, I think Wisconsin's got average resume metrics of 43, Penn State's at 50, which is relatively negligible overall. But Wisconsin's quality metrics are in the mid 60s, whereas Penn State's quality metrics are in the mid 40s. And I think overall, Wisconsin has better quality wins, particularly that road win over Marquette stands out there. So they have 6 quad 1 plus 2 wins. Penn State only has 4. But if you really want to boil it down to the teams that are solid teams, quads 1, 2, and 3 for me, Penn State's 9-7 in those games. Wisconsin's 7-8.
And then Texas A&M real quick. We have a comment in the chat that people are sleeping on A&M. Possibly true. They've been playing a lot better lately. Brad, is it their non-conference, that the losses that are kind of holding them back right now? Obviously really good in SEC play, but it's the body of work, right? It's the entire season that really matters.
It's another example of conference record doesn't matter. They're second place in the SEC, have a strong record, but the quadrant for the bad losses hurts them. And it's really put their strength of record in a not a particularly great spot. Their net is improving. They're a team on the rise. They are knocking on the door. They're a game or two away from, probably one solid win away from being in my field. But yeah, it's the overall resume. It's not what have you done the last 2 or 3 weeks. What did you do in November matters just as much as what you just did, last week.
Yeah, if you want to talk about a big hinge game coming up, Texas A&M at Arkansas, huge hinge game. Texas A&M is my last team in the field right now. They win at Arkansas, they're pretty quickly in the conversation for a single-digit seed, because I think that there's not much separating the 9s and 11s right now. And if they lose that game, well, they're right back in the position they were a week or two ago, with needing to continue to play really well to get back in the field.
It's true, and we talk about it a lot, but if you play in a high major conference, you play in the Big 10, the Big 12, the SEC, you have the opportunities to go from first team out to a 9 or a 10 seed. Teams in the Mountain West Conference, even though the conference is a little bit deeper, it's a lot more difficult. So, you're playing with fire every time you lose a game.
Yep. Well said. Well said. Good segue to our team hitters. Now we're going to do some quick team hitters. We discussed Arkansas. In the chat, Jacob says, I love the Arkansas disrespect. Is Arkansas being disrespected? This team's an 8 seed right now in bracket matrix. I'm pretty sure you guys have them lower around the same line, maybe. Guys, they have 3 quality wins. Compared to other teams around them, it's not great. They're 0-5 on the road. They have a Q3 loss. But Lukas, their predictive metrics are really high, right? They average around 22 predictively. The resume metrics not too bad. Where do you fall with Arkansas right now? How do you seed a team like that, or compare them to other bubble teams maybe?
I think their resume right now is not very good. And I think an 8 to 10 seed is a reasonable prediction to put them at. With that said, we don't, or at least I don't, and I'm assuming Brad does not either, we don't make bracketology predictions based on what we think they're going to be in March. What they are as a snapshot. And if you're an Arkansas fan feeling disrespected as an 8 to a 10 seed right now, you're probably right. Quite frankly, I mean, I think they're definitely a better team than that. And I think that they're a squad that you should look at the bracketology predictions right now and be like, okay, this is about as poor as our record can be, and we're still in the field.
Yeah.
And I think that they're a team that's probably going to be the kind of 6-7 seed that nobody wants to see in March.
Hey, I'll say this as a gambler, as a bettor, Arkansas is a top 25 team for me in my ratings. They're going to be an 8 to 10 seed. Look at the spreads when those spreads come out. They might be favored over a team that's seated above them. Right? Seeding's based on your actual wins, your resume, not on your predictiveness. Predictiveness is used to seed you mostly, right? If I have that right, bracketologist. I have one question, and Brad, maybe you can help me out with this one. So, in the case of Arkansas, we see them with a KPI of 22, strength of record 44. So, resume, those are your two resume metrics. That's a pretty big range. What do you do when you see a range like that? Do you kind of think as an outlier, the other is an outlier? Which do you give more credence to, or you just blanket average it and call it a day?
I mean, I think you still have to dig deeper than just looking at the metrics, and obviously what you mentioned before, your result-based metrics gets you into the field, and once you're in the field, the predictive metrics take over. But there's still other things to look at, and I think looking at how they performed against high quadrant 1 teams, quadrant 1 teams, quadrant 1 and 2 teams. You're comparing them to other teams that are in their seed vicinity, and who's better. I think you're comparing resumes, and I think that's what the committee does. And you need something that's going to separate you from the team that you're competing against. So I don't think it's as simple as what their metrics are. I think you have to take everything into account.
And I think another thing with Arkansas is they're just so primed to make a run in seeding, and just because they have some blatant negatives that can be so quickly overcome. They're 0-5 in road games this year, and they still get Kentucky, Texas A&M, Alabama, and Tennessee on the road. Not only would those, they also get South Carolina, but not only would those other ones be road wins, but they're road wins that are just huge leverage games that if you can get them. I think that's the big thing for me is like they're getting held back by not having those really good wins away from home. Well, there's a lot of opportunities left to get them.
Speaking to the,
I'm sorry,
go Brett.
No, Brett, go ahead. Another team you could put similarly in the mix is Creighton, a team who doesn't quite have the results there, but their predictive metrics are top 15.
Yeah.
What do you do with them? Obviously they were missing Kalkbrenner for a few games. They lost to Nebraska, lost a couple games they should have won. They're arguably the best team in the Big East. You can make the argument that they're the best team in the Big East. Maybe not right now, but maybe when the season is all said and done. So they're going to be an interesting team to see. I think they're just going to be moving up and up on a weekly basis. Be interesting to see where they end up when it's all said and done.
Yeah, Creighton 11th in KenPom, 10 seed right now in bracket matrix. I guess the quality wins holding you back. You have to think Kalkbrenner is in play there. We'll see what the committee actually does. You're right.
Yeah.
Going back to just net talk in general, I saw an argument on Twitter that I had to bring up to you guys real quick.
Argument on Twitter? No.
An argument on Twitter. Clemson fans are lamenting that their net is way below St. Mary's net, 58th versus 6th. Why is Clemson, I guess right now, behind St. Mary's in the bracket? And why do you think they're behind St. Mary's so far in the net, despite being 10-1 in the ACC? Brad?
They have 2 quadrant 4 losses.
There you go.
First and foremost, nobody else has 2 quadrant 4 losses that's trying to get in that large bid. Wow. Now, a lot of people that are just bracketology.
If there's any Aggie fans in here, you have disrespected Utah State.
Oh, okay. Ooh, okay, all right.
That's true. But they're not even in my first 4 out yet. But anyway, yeah. So Clemson is leading the ACC. So most people have them as the auto bid from the league. If they relinquish that, that puts Clemson as a team that's in the field, in my opinion. But they're an interesting team because they do have great numbers against quadrant 1 and 2. The 2 Q4 losses really bring them down, and their net is in the high 50s. Playing in the ACC, bottom of that league is not good, so there are opportunities for them to fall, unlike some leagues like the Big 12 and the Big 10.
Yeah, and Lukas, predictive metrics 53 for Clemson. So if you see them get in the field, they might be, by most people's maybe point of view, severely underseeded if they end up being top 3 in the ACC.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the thing I'll say with regards to why Clemson is where it is in the net comparatively to where St. Mary's is, I think it comes down to what the results really are in terms of quality metrics. I mean, they've had a lot of close wins this year. I know Brad mentioned their quad 4 losses, but they're not just quad 4 losses. One of them is an 18-point loss, which is a huge killer to their metrics. And if you just look at KenPom, they went down 18 spots from that loss. And that you compare that to St. Mary's, who has had a lot of very nice wins. I think in terms of their losses this season, they haven't lost a single game by more than 5. That 1 5-point loss to neutral site loss to Houston. They have another loss in overtime. I think that they have just kind of those really good close losses, whereas Clemson's had a little bit more struggle in those games overall.
I want to go to the chat really quick because we had a question on, oh gosh, 1 or 2 teams, but I maybe have missed it. Oh no, guys. I'm sorry, guys. I missed the question, but we'll go on a different point here. That's my mistake. That's poor hosting duties on me. I take full responsibility. Kentucky, real quick. I've mentioned the committee a few times here. The biasedness about selecting teams perhaps comes into play when you have a team like Kentucky on the bubble right now. Their resume compared to other teams such as Arizona State, Pitt, Oklahoma. I would say Kentucky's advantage right now over those teams maybe is their resume metrics being slightly better. However, when you look at their actual quality wins, they kind of fall short of those other teams. I guess, Brad, what's the best case for Kentucky right now, and why would they be considered more safe, quote unquote, than those other teams that I mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't consider them safe at all. But as I mentioned before, they do have the best overall win. And when you went on the road at a 1 seed at Tennessee like they did, that carries a ton of weight. And I think had they not had that win, they're not in the field. They are not in the field right now without that win. So they need to keep winning games, ideally adding some more quality wins to their resume. But they have that top-notch win that no other bubble team really has.
By net standards, they have the single best win of any team in the country.
At Tennessee. Yeah, there you go. That's a
nobody's beaten Houston on the road.
That's a good CBS selection fact there. Did Alabama beat Houston on the road?
Alabama beat Houston on the road, yes. And Rutgers won at Purdue.
Looking opposite.
There you go. Ooh.
And Temple. Okay.
Tied.
So they're not. I was
tied
looking
across
opposite.
the board.
I was looking at Houston's. My bad.
That's all right.
They've one of the best single wins in the country.
It gets mesmerizing.
Lukas, instead, let's talk about Duke really quick. Brewers fan 1212 in the chat asks, why is Duke being rated so high in brackets? I haven't seen where they're at in bracket matrix. I think they're like a 5 or a 6 seed, somewhere around there.
Probably a 6, I think.
6. What's your thoughts on Duke?
I mean, they don't really have anything that particularly stands out. They have a pretty straightforward resume to me. They don't have a lot of great wins. They're 3-6 in quad 1. They don't have any losses outside of quad 1. Their metrics are all between 20 and 40. It's a very mediocre, solid, middle of the bracket resume.
Yeah, and for me, I actually have Duke as a 7 seed. I'm a little lower than most people. But yeah, they do have a win over Xavier on a neutral court, which is big because Xavier has been really, really good in Big East play. But other than that, they're Duke. So, people say, well, they're Duke, so they should be a better seed, but it doesn't work that way. I think they're probably on the border of a 6 or a 7 seed. There's room for growth.
They're my top 7 seed today.
Yeah, but they need more. They need more. And playing in the ACC, how much more can you actually get? It's going to be. I don't see them getting much higher than where they are right now.
In the chat, Jacob asks about UConn. A very interesting team to me because I saw this team in Portland for 3 or 4 games, and for my money, there is not a better team in the country than UConn's top gear. They beat Iowa State by 18. They beat Alabama by 15, and it was easy. They made the other teams look like they were nothing. However, they have struggled in Big East play. They're still 6th in KenPom. Their predictive metrics are nuts, but they have the 19th best strength of record right now. Brad, what do you do with UConn currently? Where do you have them in your bracket?
I currently have them as my top 5 seed. So their predictive metrics are so strong. I mean, again, it's the total resume, how they played the first 12 to 14 games of the season. I mean, they weren't just beating opponents, like you had mentioned. They were blowing everybody out by double digits. So that carries a ton of weight. Teams have a rough couple of weeks. Maybe UConn is turning the page a little bit, but they did so much those wins against Alabama and Iowa State, who rarely lose games, carry a ton of weight. And then they keep them with a respectable seed. And if UConn can really flip the script a little bit and finish strong, they can only move up.
Lukas, I want to talk Charleston. We got Glick's picks in the chat here. They just lost to Hofstra. Do they have a case for an at-large if they don't win the CAA currently?
I think yes. I don't think they have much of a margin for error because I think right now they're 21-2, 20-2 in terms of bracket opinion because we negate their win against the non-D1 opponent. But if they just lose one more game and that's in the CAA tournament, they're going to enter Selection Sunday with 3 losses. That is tough to leave out of the field. It just is. They played the schedule they played. They have solid wins. They're going to have a win over Virginia Tech and Kent State that maybe not over the field, but are wins I think that the committee recognizes will be solid. And I think I think a 3-loss Charleston team, if they don't get in the tournament, I will be upset.
I hope they're in there too. They are an impressive team, fun to watch. We'll let the mid-majors in the tournament. Although
also, I think people are going to underrate that Hofstra is a good basketball team.
They're a good team. Yes, they are. I'm very against expanding the field, guys. I know we don't need to get into that whole thing, but I don't want the field extended. But I guess a Charleston would get in if we did that. Guys, anything to add? I'm going to wrap this up around 4:45. Oh, let's look at games to watch this week real quick. And if you guys see something in the chat, let me know. We can go back to a particular team. But I just want to highlight a few of these important matchups to look at as we head towards the bubble here. West Virginia is a team we have not touched on. They're at TCU this week, I believe tomorrow on Tuesday.
Tomorrow night, 9 o'clock.
No Mike Miles, no Eddie Lampkin, maybe for TCU. Brad, does it discount a West Virginia win here? Are they? How do you look at them? I guess differently if they win this game. We'll say that.
Maybe slightly, but hey, a road win is a road win when it's all said and done. And West Virginia, they need wins. That's just what they need. They just need wins. They're 2-6 in league play. Got a big win over Auburn this weekend. But the rest of their metrics are really solid. But they're that team that could finish 4 games under 500 and still get into the field.
Yep.
I think a win at TCU would be very, very big for them, regardless of who's playing. And it's unfortunate for TCU. They've dealt with injuries at, different parts of the season. They have a Q4 loss, with a couple guys out. But if you're West Virginia, you got to take advantage of it. This is how you boost your resume.
Yeah, I agree. West Virginia is a team that, as a personal preference, I have a strong dislike for teams that are below 500 in quadrants 1, 2, and 3 games combined, and that's where West Virginia stands right now. They're 7-8 in those games. They have 6 quad 4 wins. So I think a win at TCU not only gives them a road win in their pocket over a top 5 or 6 seed, maybe even a top 4 seed, depending on where you are on TCU. It also would give them an even 500 record against the top 3 quadrants.
Texas A&M goes to Arkansas. This is a couple teams we talked about in depth already. Arkansas fans being disrespected. This win goes a long way, I think. If you beat A&M, you hold serve at home court on your home court. If you lose, though, Lukas, I think you can get pretty nervous if you're an Arkansas Razorback fan. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that the other thing that I'd say about a win is if you're remotely concerned as an Arkansas fan about making the field, which that's up to you. A win over Texas A&M is also a win over a bubble team.
We got Tennessee at Florida. We want Andrew in the chat wants to talk about Tennessee. Tennessee's great. Fantastic team. They have the best defense in KenPom in its site history. That's a long time. They also have the best 3-point percentage allowed in history by a significant margin. You could argue that is good defense. You could argue it's a little bit of luck. I'm going to say it's a bit of both. Tennessee's fantastic. I'm a huge believer in this team. Rick Barnes, not a great tournament history. Small sample size theater for sure, but that's always going to be something over his head until he gets it done. But they're at Florida, Brad, this week. Florida, how close are they to the field for you? How much work do they need to do to get in or be considered?
I mean, their net is in a decent spot right now. They're definitely in being considered at the moment. They're not, I wouldn't even say they're in my first 8 out. But you beat Tennessee, now you're in the mix of what just happened with Texas A&M, who just got a big win, and all of a sudden you're creeping closer to first four out, and their metrics are pretty solid, which could put them right there in the field. And like we said earlier, if you're in one of these high major leagues and you get the opportunity to face a number one seed, you get that win, it's a game changer.
Lucas in the chat real quick. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Florida's not in my first eight out either, but they are in my first 10 out.
First 10.
I think they're 9 or 10 right now. I think the thing for Florida is I think the next 3 games decide the season. Quite frankly, I know it's early to say that. They're 1-7 in quad 1. They're 1-2 in quad 2, 2-9 overall. They need quality wins, and this is the chance. They get Tennessee at home, Kentucky on the road, Alabama on the road. Outside of that, they don't have a whole lot of. I think they only have 2 more really quality games the rest of the season. So I think this is the time where they have to get at least 1 or 2 of these games, and that's much easier said than done. But I think that's their chance.
Yeah, and 2-9 against quadrant 1 and 2 opponents is bad. Let's be honest.
That's correct. Not great. I like Todd Golden, but didn't get it done this year. Bear Down Cats in the chat says, no way Mountain West gets 3 teams in. Lucas, if you had to put a percentage on Mountain West getting 3 teams in, what would you say? What would you peg it at?
3 Mountain West teams. Well, I think San Diego State already gives you 1.
Boise's in.
I think they're pretty locked. Boise, I think, is in good shape.
New Mexico.
I think it's over 50%.
I would say 4 is in play.
More it's definitely in play. I would say for 3, I think it's over 50%.
Yep.
Okay.
If I had to put an average, I might even go as high as 3.5.
I'm going.
I would agree with that. I would say New Mexico, San Diego State, and then either Nevada or Boise State will end up getting in.
I would agree.
Maybe both.
With I think it's a league that's not super top heavy, but teams I think they're in the field. Like San Diego State is probably going to be in the 6 or 7 seed range, which is winnable for a bid stealer.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, good point. They actually they play on the road against Nevada coming up this week. Another big game tomorrow, Tuesday. That could definitely pad Nevada's resume a bit. Last one here, Oklahoma State goes to Oklahoma. We didn't really talk about Oklahoma State. Their resume, not too bad a shape, but I feel like it's sort of like Oklahoma's, right? They just need to start racking up wins, Brad, in the Big 12.
Yeah, they need wins. 2-6 against quadrant 1 teams, 4-8 against quadrant 1 and 2 teams. If you pile up some more wins in the Big 12, you're going to move into the field because everybody's good. Even Texas Tech, who is not winning any league games, they're still bordering of top 75 in the net. So yeah, you need to win games and you'll get yourself in the field.
All right, guys, that does it for us at Fielding the 68. The full bracket is going to be tweeted out from the Field of 68 handle after the show. Stay tuned for that. Again, that is a conglomeration of Lucas, Brad, Andy, and Rocco's brackets, all put together lovely by our producer, Dagan. We'll be back on Friday. That's our cadence, Mondays and Friday shows for this. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you on Friday. Good luck watching the games. They're fun, exciting. I love it. March is coming.